So now moving to item 22, the hearings panel report to the council on the Hereford Street upgrade. So, Mike, you chaired this hearings panel. If you'd like to introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Andrew. Also on the panel were Councillor Swiggs and Livingstone. In brief, there were 180 submissions, with the majority in support. I guess some of the reasons, I won't go too much in the reasons of the support, but some of the reasons that people were not in support of the plan was around the dining area and actually being too windy down there for dining. Cycle lanes, there were a number of people that actually did not want to have them down there, and then there was a number of submissions that said they weren't good enough for people that cycle, so that was sort of a bit of a mixed bag there. Roads were not, the road wasn't wide enough, loss of parking wasn't a priority at the moment. They seem to be the bit of the themes that came through. Also during the panel discussion, there were points raised by the panel around the budget, the work on the section of Hereford Street between Oxford and Cambridge Terrace, and the traffic movements at the Colombo-Hereford Street intersections, which we've identified in resolutions 2, 3 and 4. The panel also recommended that the project be completed in one phase. I guess to note, Hereford Street is in a grade 5 condition, which is the worst rating, and the project involves not just the carriageway but the footpath and the services. The traffic lanes down Hereford Street are actually being widened due to this project, and the panel did include in the resolution around the alignment between this project and the project on Hereford Street between Cambridge Terrace and Oxford Terrace, so just making sure there's good communication there. With the intersection of Colombo Hereford, there was discussion around banning a left turn from Hereford onto Colombo, and also the allowing of a right turn from Colombo onto Hereford, especially the right turn from Colombo onto Hereford coming from a single lane of straight and right turning, and the impacts that could have on the wider network if there was queuing. So what we've asked for, obviously, staff to have a look at this and then report back to the ITE committee with their findings on this. And there's obviously a lot of work that has to be, there's work in the north of Hereford Street on Colombo Street that obviously may impact on the future development of that area. Around the budget, the latest estimate is currently above the LTP budget, and this was obviously discussed at length with the panel. That estimate contains a lot of risk factor and is hopeful to come down during the tendering process. So we made sure we've added a resolution to ensure governance oversight remains on the budget, and hopefully, looking at things like trying to speed up the project will potentially reduce the cost because of the significant impact traffic management has on budgets. One thing to note also now, with the NZTA's TFAR and also FAR on footpaths, the potential subsidies that we'll get for this project will be higher, and actually any increase to budget may not actually have any impact on the ratepayers' amount that would be paid. I think one thing that we heard loud and clear as a panel was, if this project was to proceed, it needs to be done quickly. There needs to be access to the businesses, and there needs to be very, very clear communication. All the resolutions were put and they were passed unanimously by the hearings panel.
Thank you. Have we got staff if there are any questions? So there are a couple of questions I've got. The resolution number 3 notes that there's a variance between the LTP budget and current estimate and requests council officers to report back to the appropriate committee on the final expected outturn costs. And that's good that the committee obviously are going to receive that report back and continue to have oversight of the project in that way. What are the likely outcomes there? I mean, Mike has alluded to a number of reasons why we would expect that the current projected costs would decrease, particularly around timing. But clearly there's a proposal that we've consulted on. If we were to change or reduce the scope of the project because of the need to meet an LTP budget figure, that may mean that what we were to deliver was something that was different than what's been consulted on, or obviously the other would be to deliver, you know, what is needed and what was anticipated, and it may mean a budget variance where there's a need for further budget to be approved. What could that look like?
It could look like either of those things. So it could look like a change in the scope. So value engineering is involves not just looking at what has to be built and how it also looks at how it's built. So it could look like either of those things, and in both cases, reports would come back probably to the committee of the whole.
And if
it was going, but that would be part of the report back that would be coming through.
So if there was a need to significantly change the scope of the project, there might be a requirement to go out and reconsult?
Part of the pros and cons would be around this, whether we would need to reconsult or not, yes.
All right, so we're approving this today,
yes,
in that context, and I think, you know, that was certainly one of the things I was keen to drill down into a little bit further.
And that's consistent with any project. Any project, if we have to do value engineering, if the changes are significant, we need to come back to the board and talk about whether we need, the board, the committee, the council, and talk about whether we need to reconsult on this or not.
Yeah. Second question. A part of what we're considering here is, again, multiple uses of a road corridor, which has got limited space. A big part of what's been considered has been the balance between the ability for parked cars, taxis, Uber, and so on to be able to operate within that constrained space. Has there been, as part of the work that's fed into the design and the recommendations and so on, a close look at any information that's provided by our parking compliance officers, for example, who would know about parking times and demand for space and vacancy of space and vehicles overstaying time limits and that sort of thing?
When we carried out the design, we looked very carefully at the issues of how long vehicles should park on Hereford Street. So the priority is given to short time parking there, so that we get turnover of vehicles. We've got a small amount that is P60, which is metered. But what we're relying on generally for the parking in that CBD area is the off-street parking, where there's large amounts of parking on Hereford Street.
So monitoring was done around use of the existing parking spaces and the way that they were being used, which has informed the plan that's in front of us today.
That would have been undertaken by our scheme designers at the time, yes.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Pauline.
Yeah, about the Oxford Terrace, Cambridge Terrace bit, which is basically the bridge. That still sits with Otakaro, is that correct?
That's correct. We've got a meeting with Otakaro staff tomorrow just to hopefully nut out some final issues.
Right, so we wouldn't be commencing any work until we've got that sorted. Is that correct? So, I wouldn't like to see we do Hereford Street and then come back and do the bridge. Like we can hear the message loud and clear. It needs to be done all together, unless we defer the bridge for many years or something like that. So, nope. Is that, need that intersection. Can you give us some idea of what's...
So the resolution says the preference is to have it coordinated, and our preference is as well for staff, and we're working to try and achieve that.
So what I'm getting at too is that going to delay things?
We're not aiming for it to delay things, no.
Right, and then the other intersection, the Colombo Hereford, is that outside of this?
No.
But we haven't determined the movements yet.
No, my understanding is the Hereford panel is the hearings panel.
Oh, same thing.
Hereford Street Hearings Panel has approved the movements as proposed in the report, but asked staff to review them. That review needs to be done in context of the work being proposed in the square, further down Colombo Street, down towards Cashel Mall, and further down. So there's a lot of context around that. That report will come back as a review.
Excellent, because that's what I was getting at. It needs to be holistic.
Yes. I will.
Yeah.
And that won't delay this either?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Aaron and then Yanni.
Yeah, just my question. So I like the mobility car parks, it was good. Obviously the cut downs around them will be appropriate for what they are, that the gutter would be a low rise at the side and back to, so they're not going back around a garden planter in the middle of the lane to get up on a lip. Okay, and then so that's great. And then the other one was around, in our financial implications, we still don't have an equation where we apply the loss of the number of car parks to the financial implications of the job. And every time we take out a car park, like Hereford Street being quite a high use, that's a loss of $6,000 to $9,000 a year for the council. But that's not in our financial implications. Why do we not do that? Because it has a long-term implication.
Some of the parking in Hereford Street is metered, some of it is not. So it's short-term parking or loading zones.
Currently.
So yes, so only part of that is metered. So no, it hasn't been brought into the costing of this in terms of the income that may be lost.
But every time we take out a metered car park in the city, that has a financial implication to the city of $6,000 to $9,000 a year. So that should be in. Sorry. Yeah, it's a 75% usage.
That person will come and park somewhere else, and it may be in another one of our facilities, and we hope it's in Litchfield car park. It may go into one of those others. The issue that we've got, though, is that we the loading zones and things like that, the Ubers that are enabling economic activity down there in such a way that we will actually generate, because in theory there will be more people as we bring back that central city with the appropriate zone. So we don't believe the loss of on-street car parking, help me Stephen, I think our on-street car parking income's actually up at this point in time, isn't it? And off-street's down. We do monitor those two at the moment. So it does get shifted slightly, but basically it's very, very minor if there is any impact at all.
How can it be minor if you have a car park? It's like a rental space that you're getting $3 something an hour for. Then if you take that away, you're not getting $3 something an hour. It's
because that person's parking somewhere else, so they're either parking another one of our parking spaces slightly further out, and so they're paying there, or they're paying in our Litchfield car park, which is $2.80 an hour or something, I think it is now. Or admittedly, probably, you know, we will lose a bit when Mr. Goff opens his car park, but again, we'll get more people into town, and so it will be a self-compensating process.
But he's going to have it.
Thank you. Yanni.
So I just want to be clear that we will get a report on any funding that's taken off any other projects to pay for this if there's a shortfall, but that will be a decision of council.
Yes, you're correct, Councillor Harrington.
Right. And so the other thing I wanted to check was, yeah, previously when we've had those reports, we don't get the report of the project where the money's coming from. We get the report for the project that's under budget. So are we going to get the report on the project where the money's coming off so we can weigh up where that sits in terms of prioritise? Like, e.g., do you understand? Like in the past when we've had like funding shortfalls, we will get the same Hereford Street report with a funding source will say something like, I don't know, Ensour's Road PT. We don't get the report on Ensour's Road PT and what the value and the benefits are.
So the report that will come to the appropriate committee if it's over budget. So there's a chance, I think a reasonably good chance, that we won't have to report because it'll be within the budget that we've got. If it is over budget, we will report to the appropriate committee so that there is oversight on where those, on where we think we can either get those extra funds from or what scope has to change. And that will be clear in that report in relation to the requirements for the project, but it will be clear what the impacts of those changes are as well.
Okay. And just in terms of the, and sorry, I couldn't find it in all the information. There's a lot of information, but Well, the one thing I'm really concerned about is adequate queuing space for the the existing car parking building and the new car parking building. Can you just, at a high level, or maybe the hearings panel chair, but can someone just explain how you've taken that into account with the design? So, yeah.
My understanding is that the queuing, the stacking space for those car parks is actually off-road.
So within each of the car parking buildings on Hereford Street, there's room for incoming vehicles during the peak morning flow for 4 vehicles to stop within the building. And we've also modelled the impact on the street of any queuing that we required. So specifically for the Hereford car park, we had modelling done, and the owner of that car park had modelling done, which satisfied that the arrangement we had was adequate.
And we've been talking to the owner of the, to Goff's car park, to them as well, the developers there as well, and they're comfortable, and it's a similar arrangement.
Right. And in terms of like Litchfield, I mean, we've looked at the existing buildings and how they're working.
Litchfield Street car park is on Litchfield Street. We're talking about Hereford Street here.
No, but just in terms of queuing for car parking buildings in general, we've got some sense of the adequate provision.
We know that we've got adequate provision on Hereford Street. We haven't looked at Litchfield Street queuing as part of this project.
No, but the expert advice that you've got in terms of the design is based on a model.
Yes.
Not
and the
on
model
real life.
was based on Hereford Street, and the traffic flows on Hereford Street.
Yeah.
But I think they've considered the design issues as well. So, you know, it's not like the old Hereford, like the old Litchfield Street car park, where you basically had to queue up on Litchfield Street itself. The design for these buildings is different. Right. Most of the queuing is internal. Yeah. So it's better from a transport perspective.
And that'll be safely guarded through the RMA process or the decision-making process around those facilities?
I'm not sure what consenting process they need to go through for the car park. It's reasonably permissive within the central city, but we'd have to look into that.
Right. And what's the traffic? What's the likely traffic increase for Hereford Street that this has been designed for once it's complete and once all the accessible city works is done? Because obviously this is going to be kind of a key thoroughfare, and you talked about widening it as a result. So
I think it's going to remain a key thoroughfare. It is a local distributor street. As Councillor Davidson has said, we're looking to widen the lanes to 3.25 metres, and that's because it is now one of the bus routes goes through there, where previously it hadn't. So we've designed that in. But I think the main thing you're just going to see, hopefully, is a natural growth in both people cycling down there, because those numbers are increasing. Hopefully more buses using it as well, because if we increase the frequency, then we'll get more people using them. But there's also likely to be more vehicles using it as well as more businesses and other things start up in the central city. So I think it's just the normal growth pattern that we would see over any city street as the city continues to regenerate, as opposed to us making a change to the design and that fundamentally altering the number of vehicles using it.
Right. And just the final question was just in regards to the turning circles for the intersections, and just I know sorry, I can't find submissions from the emergency services, but have you talked to the emergency services and the buses, and what confidence can we have that the turning circles will be adequate? It's just I see quite a number of buses turning into other lanes in the accessible city at the moment, and I just wanted to check for these designs how you've measured for the heavy vehicles and emergency services being able to use them.
Emergency services and fire trucks in particular will probably need to turn across the lane. They are very long, but that is not unusual around the city in any situation. The lanes are being widened, as Richard just said, to 3.25, which meets buses' requirements a lot better. As far as the rest of the emergency services go, they use cars or vans particularly. So we've been generally talking to the emergency services a lot more lately, and they haven't raised any concerns with Hereford Street.
We've had regular discussions with them about this project and they're satisfied with the project. Regarding their normal buses, they just travel straight along Hereford Street, but we've applied to the design the proper turning curves for it to make sure it suits. And so stopping points are set back on lanes when necessary.
So while the emergency services themselves didn't submit, they didn't submit? No, they didn't submit. We've actually sat around a table with police, fire and ambulance and talked through the design as well, and no concerns were raised.
Yeah.
So emergency services are comfortable with what's proposed here. That's fine. Just one point of clarification. If we look at clause 3, the report back on the budget and estimate and financial considerations would be to the appropriate committee, so not to council. So that would be the Finance and Performance Committee of the whole. Yep. Pauline.
There. If it comes in under budget, can the balance please go to the Papua New Guinea's community board?
No, St Albans does.
I think you'll find this relates to a broad matter that was debated at length earlier today. Are there any further questions on this report? Okay, so you're happy to move it, Dion? Yep. Do I have a seconder? Mike will second. All right, so moved by Dion, seconded by Mike. Is there any debate? So I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Could I just quickly thank the hearings panel? I know these things are hard work, they're long hours. There was quite a few submissions. I think 8 people came and spoke. I think you did a very good job and you've covered a lot of the issues really clearly in the report. The report's fantastic. And I think this will actually just pretty much finish off the CBD really nicely for us and particularly enhance the terrace. And actually combine nicely with the work that we're going to start doing on the southwest and east of the square, and it's just going to be really good. So I'm looking forward to this being completed in rapid time with least disruption. I think we've got those learnings from other projects around town that haven't been done perhaps quite as well as we do them. So thank you. Just want to say thanks.
Thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, I just want to mention one bit of constant feedback I've had ever since the rebuild of the inner city and the changing of any of the streets, and that has been the constant voice from members of the public about the removal of on-street car parks. That has been consistent for all of the years. People don't like it, and the one point I will raise around it, and yes, there is a loss of revenue from those car parks, and yes, the city will keep getting busier, so as the buildings fill, others will move back to streets, so on and so forth. There is a percentage of people that live in the city that do not want to use parking buildings. They have a mental issue around it. Stuff happened in parking buildings in the earthquakes that put people off coming to town and using a stacked parking building. Those people will not change. They'll live in our city for the rest of their lives, hopefully, and they want to park on street. They might change, but generally 8 years, it should be most of the way through their change, but they will, they prefer to park on street. That is just their preference, and we are taking away that option. I just want to raise it, because I think those people are forgotten. So
I'll put the motion. Mike.
You don't need to walk out Hereford Street to see the site. And it's more than just a road repair. It's also a footpath and the services, telco, water, main sewers, water. But the end result is going to be a people-friendly environment. Wide footpaths with dining spaces, painted cycle lanes, and a wider traffic lanes. And it's going to cater for everyone. Then what we've heard loud and clear throughout this process is that it needs to be done quickly, and it needs to be done with really good communication and with access being retained through the duration of the project. The differences between the estimate and the budget have been highlighted, and the reason behind that given it, and government oversight is part of the equation. I support this. It's actually what needs to be done, and it needs to be done now. The city is moving forward, and this is one of the small parts that is behind.
Thank you. Dion.
Yeah, I'd agree. The city is moving forward, and this is one of the last bits in this part of the city. And this is the bridge between what will be the new Cathedral Square, the new convention centre, and the retail precinct. And to have it in the condition that it's in at the moment is not good enough. So it needs to be done. I acknowledge the loss of parking, which has reduced in number from what was the original proposal as well. So we've worked hard to try and increase the amount of parking. But what's more important, actually, especially in this part, is that we've increased the loading zones for, people who need that around the businesses, and also for the coaches and other things that are going to be using that. So there's compromise all around, but this is going to be a people place, and it's really exciting to see. There's going to be there's 3 car park buildings off Hereford Street as well, which is quite handy for people who want to use it as a car. My caveat or my caution on the whole thing is that this needs to be done ASAP, quick. And once we start, it needs to be in and out. So I'll sort of reiterate the same message to staff. Please make sure that that happens, and also that the bridge part must be done at the same time or in conjunction with this project as well, because we can't have that intersection of Oxford Terrace and Hereford Street in the condition it is when we've got a couple of streets either side and this part of the bridge, or that intersection floods when it rains. It's not good enough and it needs to be done. So we need to get the other party on side, and we need to do that as well. So at least it's in there and we've acknowledged it. There was lots of debate, but really keen to see this project get done.
Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of quick...
Yeah, that's what I thought I was doing.
Oh.
Yep. Okay. So my apologies. I should have come to others first and come to you last. My apologies. I don't have any discretion in that regard. I don't think there's any harm in allowing people to speak. Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a member of the panel, good to see the panel being able to find a way to grab hold of the financial considerations, which isn't always easy, I think, in a hearings panel, but we've been able to do that with that recommendation number 3. We're very conscious of the costs, and that part of this has been traversed. On the loss of on-street parking, as part of the new city, the new architecture is very visible. So wherever we go, just about in the central city, we see huge beams, big bolts. I mean, there's a strong argument you're much safer in a parking building than on the street anyway, exiting a car. But it was a good panel, worked well, and fully behind this.
Thank you. Dion, what I will do is give you an opportunity to speak at the very end, if there's anything additional you wish to add at that time.
I just want to thank the panel.
No, we're not there yet, but we will be. Jani.
Yeah, look, I thank the panel for the work that they've done. I will support this, but I do have some concerns, particularly concerned that we can't put the cycleway off-road along the footpath. There were a number of submitters that did raise, again, concerns over the narrow width of the cycle lane. And I just think when you think about lime scooters and cyclists going through here with the heavy vehicles, the queuing for the car parks, and given that this is going to have a huge increase in traffic when the convention centre's open, when all the other anchor facilities are open, this is going to be the main east-west. So I do raise that concern with the cycleway design. My preference would have been to have it a shared path along the footpath. And then the other thing is, I totally understand that the category that the street needs its basic services and basic curbing and channel fixed. It is in a really bad shape. So I totally get that, and that's why I will support it today, because it does need to be done. But I will not support additional budget going in to gold plate it if that's what's required. So I look forward to that coming back if that's necessary, and will be very reluctant to support it if additional funding is sought. I think it's good that staff have actually identified that there could be a project shortfall. Unfortunately, I wish that had happened in some of the other projects in my ward, but it hasn't. After we've approved it, we've found out. So I think it's really good for us at this early stage to be aware of it. But I hope this is successful. I do think the street is going to face a huge increase in traffic when all the plans are finalised in the central city, and I think we will need to monitor it and just see how it's going, especially with heavy vehicles going through.
Sarah.
Thank you very much. Just to address a few of the concerns that have been raised here. When it comes to the design in the central city, it's really clear that shared paths really aren't suitable for really high pedestrian and high cyclist number areas. And we wouldn't be able to get them either wide enough or separated enough for pedestrians to feel safe walking around the city, walking in and out of shops, in and out of their different access ways, as well as the vehicles going across there. It's really clear that this design is in a tight space, but I'm really confident that an enormous amount has been done to look at all of the different options of where things could go, and that the experts who have studied this for many years and are professionals in their fields have come up with the best option. And the hearings panel have gone through a process where they have questioned and checked and looked at submitters' concerns and have satisfied themselves that that's the case. When it comes to gold plating, that would be a concern for me if indeed the scope was exactly the same as originally had been planned and that the budget had increased. But actually this is different now. You know, there's a whole pile of knowledge now about the different type of work that is involved, and I'm confident that it will come in at or as close to the original budget once the rest of the work's done.
Thank you. Dion, would you now like to close the debate?
Okay, I will. Actually, I was going to say, the staff know how much of a stickler I can be on some transport things around the city, and they know my opinion on some of the ways that we've done some of the execution of said transport projects. However, in this case, I will commend them for the work that's been done. There has been a lot of work done. We walk down that street and everybody knows how bad it is, so look, let's celebrate the positive. It's going to be really cool. There's going to be some amazing buildings down that part of the city. It is going to be a busy part of the city, and even more importantly, it's actually going to be wider than what it is right now, so that every car user will have to celebrate that it's actually going to be wider than what it is now, so you'll feel more space, I suppose. So yeah, really happy to support it. Hopefully it goes through and gets done quickly.
So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. So Aaron, your vote against. Thank you. That's